Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 out of 4 videos about the pretty massive Massena milestone for WARNO that is coming up next week. And this time we look on the formation on the pact side, which is a really cool and unique one called Kampfgruppen der Arbeiterklasse Bezirk Erfurt. And it's already in the name. This formation is about the Kampfgruppen der Arbeiterklasse, which are paramilitary forces units in the East German army that were supposed to do territorial defense behind the line and help out the NVR and the Soviets when the West Germans attack and keep the socialism alive and defend the proletariat against the capitalists on the other side. That's at least the idea they pitched. And yep, they're not the top line of units and they don't get top line equipment, but they still get pretty cool stuff, and we will get through that in here. Starting in the logistics tab, which has one cool thing, and that's another Me-26. And this thing still is too chunky to really fit on a screen in the hangar. So yeah, absolutely massive. Sadly, slightly overpriced. Most other recon logistic prices got reworked, but this one sadly didn't. So it's still 265. Gets you 6,000 supplies, but should be closer to 200 or maybe even 180 if you compare it with the T813 supply truck, which gives you, with 3 carts, nearly 6,000 as well for 180 points. So that's something you could still work on. It's a work in progress build as well, so maybe still comes, but I wouldn't expect this change on this build, but in the future one. You get 2 4 availability leaders though. You get 2 other options with armored leading units as well, with armored CV options, and 3 cards of supply trucks with good availability. So this is a pretty decent logistics step. As I said, nothing super fancy, but still good enough options and good enough slots to have a good time with this logistics tab. And then we go into the infantry tab, and here we have 2 completely new infantry units for the East Germans. One of them is the Volkspolizei. They still are a work in progress. They are supposed to have the AKSU not quite modeled yet, but eventually they will have that as a submachine gun. They're a 6 submachine gun unit with an RPG 18, so they can defend you against enemy breakthrough IFVs. Somewhat similar, I guess, to the Pioneers on the West German divisions. For 25 points, you get a 6-man unit, just that these get an AT weapon instead of TNT, but can be pretty helpful in defending some territory for a small price, and 12 availability is great for that as well. And then the other really unique unit comes down here with Kampfgruppen der Arbeiterklasse, Schützen, and these are the biggest squad we have in the game so far. These are 14-man squads for 55 points, which is relative, like mid-priced segment. You only get 1 LMG, but you also still get an AT weapon, and you get 13 KMS 72. So a really solid weapon loadout for a pretty cheap infantry squadron, and you get 12 of them per card as well. Also, obviously, poor training, as these are paramilitary units. They are not trained by the military. They are post their service and not in active military duty, so training is not as high standard as for other units, but they will give you a lot of firepower and especially a lot of hit points for that price. And they also come in a decent transport with the Spähwagen 152K, which looks pretty cute and has a 50 cal on top as well, and has decent speed on the road. Off-road a bit slower, but still decent there as well. Other than that, you get a lot of the classic East German infantry. You get some Mordschützen SMG. You don't get any BMP as transports, as this is a rearguard unit, so you only get rearguard transports like the BTR or some V50 LAA. And then you get some Fagot ATGMs. Sadly, no Conquerors in this one. SPG9s come in 2 versions though as well. One on a UATS and one as dismounted. And then you get Pioneer flamethrowers, you get Pioneers with TNT, and you get a Pioneer leader. And then, to have some elite infantry in this as well, that help out with the rearguard units and help out dealing with breakthrough NATO forces behind the lines. You have the Spetsnaz, which give you some nice punch in this infantry tab, as they also, unlike in the other divisions they come in, can come in trucks here, as obviously compared to the 35th, which is supposed to be an airborne and air assault division that needs to be quick. Here it's not quite as important, which is a nice option though, being able to bring these without helicopter, as then they only cost 65 points for a unit that gives you an RPG-29 and some decent firepower as well with the AKSUs and the RPK on a 7-man squadron for 50 points. So, pretty cool unit here as well. And then you get some mod Schützen, but once more only in mediocre transport, and a couple of leader versions here as well. The Spetsnaz leader, sadly, not carrying a RPG-29, only a 26 version, which is still a decent weapon. And they get a Winterus and some AKSUs as well, so decent firepower, but relatively pricey. The K.d.A leaders, not too amazing. Mod Schützen leader also, only 4 hit point unit, not that great either. And the Volkspolizei is the worst infantry leader so far, but at least also the cheapest with 105 points. And you have a lot of slots, so you can fill this pretty deeply. And like, for example, 3 K.d.A already gives you 36 infantry units. And then you can go with some Spetsnaz, can go with some Volkspolizei. If you go with this, you have 66 infantry units already. And you still have 4 slots open. So this, for sure, is a spam division. And that won't change in the other tabs that much either. So infantry gives you a lot of good numbers. Artillery gives you a lot of good firepower. And once the artillery rework comes around, this should be a really nice artillery tab, as we get a 120mm mortar we already know, the D30 we know as well. But then we got a new artillery piece in form of the M46, a mid-sized howitzer, 130mm, so bigger than the D30, slightly smaller than the D20, but good rate of fire, decent damage, and currently a bit pricey maybe, but we will see how it performs. It already performs decently, I would say, with 10 rounds per minute, but once the artillery work comes around, this should be pretty good, and so will this thing most likely be, as you get the 2S7M Malka, which only has 3 rounds per minute, but is a 203mm gun, so comparable to the M110 on the NATO side, and has really long range and good damage on each shot, and this should be pretty cool as well in the future, and is already okay, I would say, at the moment, but the rate of fire keep holding it back quite a bit. And then you get the Smersh, which has huge rockets and is a pretty cool unit as well, though once more, not performing as well as you would expect it at the moment. In team games though, all of these are still viable options, and 1v1 just not really cost efficient and not performing as well on killing stuff as you would want it in those setups. And then let's move to the tank tab, which is surprisingly quite a bit more competitive than its NATO counterpart, especially also thanks to the tank repricing, as it gets a couple of tanks that profit from that. But starting already with a pretty cool unit, you don't have too many slots for a lot of choices actually, so you will have to make some tough choices here. And the first unit you get is a 20-point ATGM. Sadly, the ATGM is kind of trash, but 20 points is really cheap. And you get UATs with fagots on it. And then you get some BT-76s, which you also don't get in the tank tab of any other division. You get some recons in some other decks, but these you will get here as well. And the BT-76 has a decent gun, has good rate of fire, range is a bit low, accuracy also, but you can deal with light armor, and you get a lot of them. So this thing for sure is spammable, and that only gets topped by the T-34 or 85, which is obviously absolute vintage at this stage, in service for nearly 50 years at this point, but it is still an armored piece with a gun that infantry can't just kill with small arms. And it deals damage to them with some bigger boom than the BT-76, as its HE value is slightly higher. But it loses AP power against armored units, because obviously the shells for these things not too great. Frontal armor is also really lackluster for this part of the 20th century. In Steel Division 2, obviously this is a relatively top-end tank. In WARNO, not so much anymore. And it comes with 40% accuracy as well, so which is not great either. Rate of fire also rather low, obviously. But it at least has 2 MGs, it has decent HE, and the frontal armor is slightly higher than the PT-76, so combining these could be pretty nice. And it's also slightly faster. So the PT-76 currently has good optics, this only has mediocre. And then you get 2 forms of anti-tank guns that we already know. The D44 that we know from 35th, and the way better, I would say, because it also has a quite capable ATGM Rapira 100mm, which comes in both the 39th and the 4th mod Schützen already. And then we got a new ATGM carrier in form of the Speerwagen 40P2 Malyutka. And this gives you at least some decent ATGM capabilities next to the Rapira in a deck that otherwise lacks that somewhat. With 2600 meter range, the Fagot sadly only has 2400, and 17 penetration, and an accuracy that is manageable with 45%, though sadly Soviet accuracy on ATGMs in general is rather low. But for 40 points, this gives you the capability to deal with medium tanks like Leopard 1s relatively easily on long ranges, relatively effectively. So, is a worthwhile consideration. Maybe you can also use it to help your tank spam in tank push with dealing with some maybe heavier opposition and keeping them behind your other tanks. So that's an option as well. And then we have some classic T55s with high veterancy, which also come in great number. Only the A model, no upgraded stuff here, no higher quality stuff. And then a couple of T62s, which is your high end in this deck. In most other decks, we see them in there, the low end of tanks. Here, they are your high end. And they're not even costing you 100 points, so that tells you a lot about this tank tab. But still better than Territorial Command Süd's M48s, as they can at least penetrate medium tanks relatively easily, though rate of fire here is low. Frontal armor is relatively low as well, and you are also a rather slow tank. So these still don't give you the chance of going toe-to-toe in tank fights with something like a second Panzer Grenadier, but they at least give you the capabilities of stopping some of their armor from some angles. So you might want to use these as well, together with some spam. But as you can see, tank tabs are limited, so you have to have some tough choices to make here in how you use them. And then if you want to use even more armored vehicles, the Recon tab has you covered with 2 cards of BT-76s. So with that, you come up to an amazing number of potentially 24 here and another 18 here. So an amazing number of 42 BT-76s if you want to use them. So you can really flood the enemy with these. And then you also got some BRDMs if you want even some more armor. Some Aufklärers, which are decent. Some Me-2s as helicopters, which do the job as recon helicopter pretty okay as well, as they have 10 hit points. And then Spetsnaz crew, which are really cool. They have the RPG-27, which is a really good RPG as well, though slightly short range, but penetration is good, accuracy is good. And then Winteress and Val also give you a lot of damage, and just like the normal Spetsnaz in this deck, they also can come in gas, which is a nice option as well, unlike the ones in 79th tank core. And then the AA brings us some cool stuff as well. Start with Stolas, not that cool. ZSU 23, yeah, also not that cool. But then we already got the first new unit that is pretty fancy, with the dual 35mm Flak Self-Fire Lafette 57-2. Relatively outdated weapon at this stage, but 35mm still do damage to a plane or a helicopter if they hit them. Especially against helicopters, this thing is pretty useful. Accuracy is relatively on the low end, but damage is pretty good, and the range is decent as well, both is against planes and helicopters. And against ground targets, this thing also kind of shreds. So it is a helpful unit, and it comes with great availability. I would recommend bringing it with 1-star veterancy though, so that your accuracy goes up a bit. And then you get the OSA as the first time for a division of the GDR. So far we only got them with the Soviets, and this is nice as well. It comes with good availability as well. But the way more important unit here is the Buck. The Buck is the most long range and also a pretty accurate long range SAM. And that is pretty strong. Giving Pact maybe now the edge over the Hawk with this. Yes, you pay 50 points more though. But 9 damage per missile you do as well. You have 4 of them. So you can wait with the reload maybe a bit longer than with the others. And the accuracy is even better with 65 instead of 60 for the Hawk. And you for sure outclass the Cup by quite a bit. So the Buck for sure a great addition to the AA tab. And making this a pretty scary AA tab in general. Especially as they can also come with free veterancy. And if you find with only 2 of them, they go up to 81% accuracy, which is really high for an AA weapon already. So, yep, they can keep this guy clean for you, which is needed in this deck, but is also for sure a nice reason to play this deck in a team game, for example, to help out your team with the AA. Yes, your tank tab might not be the best, and once you run out of the spam there, you might be in trouble. But you still give some quality to your team with the AA. Helicopter is decent, especially as luckily these 2 versions of the Mi-8 got reduced in price. This was at 210 points before, this at 200. Now they're at 160 and 175 points respectively, which are prices where I would start considering taking them. As this one has some ATGM capabilities, which is helpful in this deck, as tanks of yours don't deal with medium tanks too well. And then you have an even better one with some cocons in the form of a single Mi-24P, which you have to use wisely, as yeah, you only get one, but that can help. That coming out at the right time can really save yourself an engagement and a flank maybe, or allow you a breakthrough that you wouldn't otherwise get by maybe killing off some nasty T-72s or some nasty Leo 1A5s and so in front of you. So really good addition to this deck as well. And then you get one more Mi-8MT with gun pods, but these are not the same ones that we had before. This one also includes some 30mm grenade launchers, which is pretty pog. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I first didn't realize it, but I then saw them in action. They are pretty cool, and they're actually a bit more capable than the one with only gun pods. As you can see, the 30mm have slightly more range, so they can shoot from a bit further away, and they also deal pretty good damage. So yeah, a lovely addition as well, this Mi-8MT Gov. And you have okayish availabilities for these cards as well. And then in the air tab we also have some cool new planes versions, like no completely new plane itself, but a lot of cool new loadouts, including this first rocket MiG-21 with some insanely huge rockets, 240mm, the biggest caliber of air-mounted, like unguided rockets we have so far, and they for sure blow up infantry units in their pass-by, but they also pay a nice price for it. 175 points ain't cheap, and against armored targets you're not reliably killing them with this, so 175 points is for sure a steep price. Maybe could go down to 160, as the platform itself is fast, but it's 10 ACM and not the most amazing turn radius. Make it somewhat easy to shoot down, and then cost efficiency here might struggle a bit. You get also an HE bombing version that we already know. And then you get the MiG-23 MF-80, which got reduced in price a bit and is still not that efficient though, as 35% accuracy is really lackluster. You might want to take it with one's divergency, then it at least is 40%. And then these planes might pay off. But it's still a bit of a gamble. And so 40% accuracy, still chances are that you might miss both of your missiles in a run. And then you don't kill the tank. Though if these KH-23M hit, they do the damage, as they're massive and they deal 30 damage. So they one-shot most of the tanks out there. And then MiG-23 AA is your only AA plane with mediocre missiles, to be fair, but also a cheap price. So, and combined with a great AA, you don't need the best air superiority fighters to hunt down enemy planes. You just, I guess, need these here to keep your planes away, safe from enemy air superiority fighters diving too deep onto them. So, and keeping them busy. So, for that job, they are just fine with the price. And then a couple of MiG-27, some with HE, some with better ATGMs. The KH-29 team with 50% base accuracy, outclassing the MiG-23 ones by quite a bit. But the MiG-23 is the faster plane, so yes, and it's 5 points cheaper. So it's a decision to make here for sure as well. Then the Su-17 with some lovely rockets as well. Not quite as big as the one on the MiG-21, but still, these are nothing to sneeze at with 122mm. And it also has some air-to-air missiles to defend itself a bit for 210 points. And then a new lovely seed plane with the Su-24 MP, which is the highest ECM plane on the Soviet side so far, with 60 ECM, allowing it to stay alive through enemy AA for quite a bit longer. But you also have to dive somewhat deep into enemy air defense to get your your seed missiles on target. The KH-28 only has 4,500 meter range, has decent accuracy, and will one-shot everything it hits. But yes, you have to go in a bit deeper to hit the target. And currently, in the current version, iHawks are still a bit bugged, so that is like killing those still is a bit luck-based with seed planes at the moment, as their hitboxes still don't seem to work. So I hope Eugen can fix that before this goes live, but we will see. Which is currently quite a bit of a bane in the existence of Soviet seed planes, and I really hope that is get fixed soon, as then these will be quite a bit more efficient. Then an Su-24 cluster napalm bomber with 6 napalm bombs. Fast plane, good ECM, so nice one as well. MiG-25 bomber with quite a bit of payload. Decent plane as well. And then the Su-22 cluster. So a lot of good options here as well. And they round up this deck nicely with giving it the capabilities of dealing with tanks, with the cluster, with the AT capabilities. And also have some other solid options as well. AA planes is just fine for this deck. Fitting its like scenario setup, its storyline, as obviously not the best air superiority fighters would be dedicated to the rear. And AA here already is supposed to do the job, and there's not supposed to be that many planes around. But ground attackers have it easier here, because this is supposed to fight behind your front line. So with less enemy air around, so that your bombers can get through, which is represented by the amount of bombers you get pretty nicely. So overall, a really flavorful and lovely division, giving the East German the spam we all wanted out of them, I would say. And a lot of nice choices to make. Like, the deck building here won't be as easy as it first looks. With this tab especially, a lot of things fighting for the slots. AA also having some nice, decent option. Helicopters, a couple of choices to make there. And the infantry tab also well filled, I would say. With a lot of good slots though. So, should be cool. And I'm really looking forward to have them around. And yeah, let me know down below what you think about this deck. Next video in this series will be about all the patches, like for example the tank price rework, and a lot of other cool smaller changes as well made by Eugen with this patch. So yes, if you want to see that video and you want to make sure that you don't miss it, click the subscribe button down below. And let me know down below what you think about the Kampfgruppe der Arbeiterklasse and overall the patch so far. And with that said, hope to see you all next time. Have a nice day, and bye-bye.